Good afternoon. So we're a week into 2020 already. But it seems that I made the adjustment a lot more seamlessly than I expected. Perhaps I've been anticipating 2020. Who's to say? I've been experiencing, I've been living, I've been being with whether to communicate or not, especially in terms of abiding, everlasting, irreversible awakening. I've come to understand that at least 90% of beings that have previously awakened, 90% just don't talk about it. And I thought, wow, that's rather high. What am I missing? What is the impetus for my willingness to share my experiences? Well, first and foremost is the hope that it'll be of some use to those that have yet to experience the abiding awakening. And just as I've gleamed onto anything that I can find from anybody that post abiding awakening, I've gleamed onto, I've gravitated towards, I've hungered for words from those that have had the experience. And what motivates me is not to validate my own, because there's no doubt within, when it happens, you'll know. You won't have to wonder. You won't have to ponder. You won't have to seek outside validation. But misery loves company, as the old adage goes. And a lot of the experience tends to be miserable. It's a death, after all. It's a time of mourning. It's a death of everything that you thought was so, everything that you thought was you. So there's a mourning. And depending on how much you're vested in your psychological, intellectual, emotional, physical self, the greater the sense of loss. But in my case, I wasn't vested at all. I had inklings of impermanence, inklings of understanding that all was not as it seemed. There was more to it. You hear in the background, perhaps, our Taiwan Air Force sending a message to Big Neighbor across the strait. We're alert, we're awake, we're aware, we're here. But I find it a little disconcerting. I began this video previously and I let that go. I stopped and began again, but I'm just going to talk over it. But it's just us in Taiwan saying hello to Big Neighbor, and we're not pushovers. If you're going to get us, it won't come easily. And what will be, though, isn't it? So this high percentage of people, this other 10% that's willing, maybe even driven to some extent, to share. I don't know what's motivated me for 3 years to keep producing these, to keep sharing, to keep making these videos? Probably many things, a myriad of things. One is that I wanted to document. This has become my medium of choice. I always thought that I'd be writing, but I find this a lot more intimate, even though I'm sitting talking to a machine, looking into a little green dot, a camera, and imagining what's out there, if anything. But anyway, as I said, I've been driven. I found it necessary to share in the hopes that it will help. It'll be helpful to anyone, to someone, as they approach their abiding awakening, after they've accepted the impermanence of unabiding awakening. Even though at the time most unabiding awakenings, we go through a series of them until abiding awakening, till permanent, temporary awakening. But it seems permanent at the time, doesn't it? It seems like you've had a glimpse, and you have. But what telling is that, can you maintain this sense of knowing, this experience? Has it become intrinsic? Has it become part of you? Time will tell. But also I'd like to add that how much it's meant to me and how much thanks I give to those brave souls who've shared their experiences. It's very meaningful. Again, appreciate it. But what I've come to understand only recently was that why such a small percentage are willing to share? Well, historically, they didn't have access. I'm sitting in my own meditation / bedroom / office, sharing, able to share and send it out on the broadcast, airwaves, to record it, to witness it. So previously, many didn't have the resources that I'm lucky enough to have now, that we're sharing. And all I can say is, let's enjoy these while we have them, because who knows what the future will bring. The internet will evolve or devolve. Such is the nature of things. But again, not within my purview. I just enjoy what I've got while I got it. So what else could account for this lack of sharing? Well, one thing I've come to understand is that abiding awakening and leaving the physical body usually come hand in hand, hand in glove. One quickly leaving the body quickly occurs in many cases after abiding awakening experience, because you're not equipped, you're not prepared to do what's necessary to keep the physical body. And this is what's necessary, is unselfish, undirected, unfocused desire. A desire for something greater. A desire I was asked by my teacher if I would be content just to continue my journey and leave my body at the end of this incarnation and just continue on the never-ending spiral into the infinite. Or would I choose to share with all sentient beings my experiences? And I wholeheartedly chose the other. And this indirectly, it seems, started the preparation for me to be able to understand how to retain the physical form once I've merged with the infinite. Having resolved the conundrum of duality as it morphed into non-duality. It's interesting how we have to describe something by what it's not. It's non-duality. Non-duality. Is there a better word? I'll work on that. Maybe that's what I'm here for. Maybe that's what I'm sure I'm going to come up with a word that doesn't include what it's not. Not duality. Singularity, but that implies through quantum physics, singularity is a finite point, and that as you approach the finite point, perhaps this is it, singularity implodes and explodes to the cosmos, to everything. The Big Bang. But for many, awakening came unannounced. It simply just happened. So this is that old instant enlightenment or gradual enlightenment. Well, it's interesting that gradual ends up with instant, doesn't it? So this is kind of a moot measurement. It happens when it happens the way that it happens. So was I prepared? Was my teacher preparing me for the moment when I experience abiding awakening? Was he preparing me for a way that I could maintain, I could keep a grip on my physical entity, my physical body, even though the need for it seemingly no longer existed? I do remember a point when I could have just let go. But intrinsically, I realized that some form of desire, it had to be selfless desire, unselfish desire, to make any sense at all. Some desire had to reside somewhere within that would enable me, through the wisdom of the ages, through the unspoken, unknowable source, to remain here, to walk amongst my brothers and sisters. And this harkens me back to my old Zen training when I was learning the Zen walk in the Renzai dojo. Everyone else was kendo, kyushu archery, a physical form of meditative action. And I was simply and continually, by my Roshi, assigned to walk, just walk one foot in the front of the other in the Zen tradition. And now, at that time, I just wondered why I was being, I was the only one doing that. Why was I being sorted out to just do this? Wasn't I capable of Kyushu? I thought Kyushu, focusing archery, focusing on a target would probably, since I'm this way, this would help me focus. But the wisdom of my Roshi was greater than my wisdom. And he had me walk. And I've come in 2020 hindsight, I've come to appreciate that the Zen walk indeed is the central, it's the kernel, it's the seed of all martial arts. And I remember once the Roshi talking about becoming invisible. And I began to understand what this meant, that it's physically possible to be invisible. You're in so close, you're so totally tied to the rhythm of life that you go unnoticed. That a Zen master could walk through a crowd, parting the crowd, almost invisibly parting the crowd, without being seen, without being felt, without being touched, without being experienced, in all essential ways invisible. He became invisible. When you're in the rhythm of things, you can't be separated from that rhythm. You can't be noticed. That's the textbook definition of invisibility, isn't it? So I think that background, I think in so many ways life had been preparing me. If I was given a textbook and step-by-step directions, it wouldn't have been as meaningful as the things I accumulated, seemingly random occurrences in my life that led to a conscious whole, seeming disparate paths that miraculously merged into a single path, as if by design. That is a source of mirth for me. That's pretty funny. That somehow in my madness, my parrot madness, at least to outside of observers, I was always pretty peculiar. Liked, well liked most of the time. Never understood. And I'm blessed in this last part of my life to have found a woman who understands me, who sees the method in my madness, who also at the same time realizes that I would make no claim to any said method. I just went where I was led. I trusted. I surrendered to the powers greater than me. So now I see that all of this was a training, a preparation to retain a physical form. And in my case, it seems happenstance. I never even knew that abiding awakening traditionally meant leaving the body. I'm not aware of that. Yet I was preparing for it my whole life. Because if I was certain of anything, it was that I wanted to remain on this plane as long as I can, as long as I can be of any use to even a single soul out there. That even a single soul would mean that I fulfilled my objective of sharing, fulfilled my investment in sharing what's not talked about very often. And the understanding now, this late in the game, that it wasn't that they were so selfless, or quite the opposite, so selfish that they didn't want anyone else to get there. They simply weren't here. It's pretty hard to verbalize, to vocalize when you're no longer gifted with physical form, isn't it, after all? So here's to that 10%. Here's to that 10% that chose to share. And I'm building up to a point that is the irony. It captures the irony completely of this condition I find myself in. And that is the moment you speak out, the moment you share, you're bound to be misunderstood. I know out of ignorance, I declared my abiding awakening to a handful of friends before I was mature in my post-awakening state. I was a baby Buddha, helpless. And I guess at that time I shared with maybe 8 people, and only 2 of the 8 believed me, truly believed me, even though they've questioned me over the years. Did it really happen? So there's still some doubt. But this is to be expected. Actually, it's welcomed. Because I'm not vested in, I'm not selling anything. I'm not trying to attract a following. I'm simply being who I am as long as I have an opportunity or need to be who I am, to be this man in this physical form. The reason that you're bound, as soon as you're expressing things outside of the normal experience, and your own included, you have to understand, there's that word, you have to know that understanding, our concept of understanding, is based on what we already know. We're not equipped, it's not in the realm of possibilities that we could understand something that's not in our current understanding. It's not in our lexicon. It's not in our library. It's not in our experience. It's not in our imagination. Because these events are simply at the same time grander, and in that grandeur of experience is the light of ordinariness. It comes an understanding that this is our condition. We're all Buddhas in different stages of sleep. Some of us are in deep hibernation. Others are in restless wakefulness. There's the myriad of experiences along the way from being hibernating sound asleep to an inkling of awareness that one only has to open one's eyes to truly wake up. And when one opens one's eyes, this is the beauty of ordinariness. When one opens one's eyes, they see that this is the normal condition. It's not extraordinary. It's not beyond ordinary. It's simply the ordinary condition that we all share. This awareness, this wakefulness, this Buddhahood. So words are necessary. I'm using words because it's all I got. I think for most, just watching my behavior might be a little subtle. How I behave, how I interact with the world, how I let the world come to me might be a little subtle for most people. But many more sensitive souls have a feeling when you're around somebody like this, somebody that's at ease with themselves. There's some sense, some inkling of peace, equanimity, clarity, joy, occasional glimpse of bliss, blissfulness. I guess I was always wary of bliss because I saw bliss as the unavoidable highway out of here. Teleportation, bliss. So I've always chosen to experience bliss in very brief flashes. Spontaneous flashes. There's been no effort on my part to meditate, to hold a thought, to even gravitate towards blissfulness, because I always recognize the inherent danger that bliss offers. And as those words come out of my mouth, isn't it ironic that something so overwhelming, something so inclusive, could also have a flip side? It's that desire. If you have no desire to remain, you're gone. If you've had no training in remaining, you're gone. So that's why we hear so little. It's not that this is such a rare occurrence. There's thousands, millions of awake beings, fully awake, still around, still in their physical body, while proportionally greater number has gone on to rest in the arms of the brotherhood and sisterhood of evolved beings. So if you start out understanding, if you start out with the deep understanding, the understanding that comes with the abiding awakening process, that no one will be able to understand you. I'm blessed. I have one, my wife, but she wouldn't admit to me or to the world that she understands. And that makes it even more special and beautiful. She's reticent to share. She knows about my battle with my spiritual ego, and she doesn't want any way to feed that. She's not entirely convinced that I've moved on past this. So if you begin with the understanding that no one is going to understand, and as I've always said, my own words will support me here, always question, never accept. Not on blind faith, not on anything. Question, 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 until you know, exhaust those questions. And you become like me, that just ran out of questions. One day, no questions. A man driven by questioning came to a time, a place and time where the questions no longer existed. And I think this is when true understanding began. And it's a process. You have to mature into your wakefulness. You have to get over the fact that not only will no one understand, no one will believe. If you say the words, I've experienced abiding awakening, you'll be hard pressed to find a single soul who would not question, who would agree, who would recognize, because they're simply not equipped to recognize something beyond their understanding. We can only understand through our own level of understanding. Everything that comes in, we translate it into the lingua that's available to us, the experience, the words that are available. And we judge that understanding based solely on our own ability to understand. So, keep it humble, but share. I would love to hear from other awakened beings that had somehow maintained their physical form. I have two favorites I've mentioned before. Adya Shanti, a Northern Californian American that I met 25 years ago. And an Indian guru, Sadhguru, who I've never met, that I listen to because both of them are awakened beings that are willing to share. There's a part of that 10%, and it's the 10% that's accessible to me. It's the fraction of 10% that resonates with me. You may find others. My wife has been listening to Eckhart Tolle. She feels that it's a connection. Me, not so much, but I have my own. She has her own.